women as well. Happy to see that there's some improvement in as far as ensuring that these are included. We have seen of late that children, young people are part of, for instance, the government delegation to COP28. That's important, but I think we can do more in terms of ensuring that prior, for instance, going to COP28, we deliberately mobilize the children, we deliberately mobilize the women, we deliberately mobilize the young people to effectively contribute to the national position by our government. I think that is very critical. But also, there are a number of national policy frameworks that government is undertaking, which we feel they're also very critical as ensuring that the voice of children, women, and young people are taken on board. For instance, the review of national climate change policy is critical. We have currently the new Disaster Risk Management Act, which government, through Parliament, adopted last year. But I think the content of the act itself requires more awareness to these groups, because it is these acts of Parliament which, protects the rights of these critical sectors. And therefore, they need to be informed in terms of what the legal provisions are in as far as the DRM Act is concerned. Equally, currently, government is reviewing the national DRM policy. That also needs to ensure that all these groups are well informed in as far as it is important. So in summary, I would say these groups require information. They require platforms that can be inclusive platform for that matter, that can ensure that their views are taken on board. These groups require recognition as rights holders, not just as mere recipients of development of policies, of pieces of registration. They are active agents of change in their own right, and therefore they need to be recognized as such. And finally, perhaps it's also the issue of capacity building, ensuring that these groups are well, are capacitated, empowered to understand all these frameworks that we're talking about. They're very technical, but critical to ensure that their rights are being fulfilled and protected. So deliberate and tailor-made, capacity building or training targeting these groups would really be fundamental in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for bringing up these aspects of the people that are living the impacts need to be part of the decision-making table. I learned it the hard way that if you just act on the ground and you have a poor policy or poor policy implementation, there's literally nowhere it's like you're going in circles. There is nothing you're going to change. So thank you for bringing in that important aspect, why policy implementation, but formulation needs to have those serving being part of the decision-making table. Thank you for that. And with that, I'll turn to you, Lucy. We're talking about issues of loss and damage. We're talking about how we need to involve critical sectors, the importance of policy in that space. How does Habitat for Humanity come into the picture? And why is loss and damage of interest to you?
Thank you so much, Condi. Can you hear me? Hi. Okay. Thank you so much, Condi, and good afternoon, everyone. Of course, I'll be talking about what Habitat is and what we're currently doing. We are not active into the loss and damage, as in the name of loss and damage, but there's a lot that we are doing as an organization. Just to give a bit of a background about Habitat for Humanity, we are a non-government organization that is affiliated to Habitat International. We've been in Malawi since 1986, and our vision was a Malawi where everyone else has a decent place to live in. Basically, we came in to address the housing poverty. And since then, we've supported about over 75,000 people with our different programs. As just to talk about the programs that we've been implementing in the past years, they've been greatly influenced by the effects of climate change. So for example, when we came in to address housing poverty, our main focus was to promote the low-cost housing. when I talk about the low-cost housing, we're looking at a housing that can easily be replicated at community level using the local available resources. But as the change of the way, as the weather started changing and the weather conditions became more harsh, we realized that I think there was no time for us to promote low-cost housing. There was time for us to move on and come up with a design that can stand disaster. So at that point, our technical team changed the design of the houses that we're promoting at that time to ensure that it also incorporates the disaster resilient features. So there are so many things that I'll be talking about. Technical, I'm not a technical person, but of course there's some features that we brought into the design of the house to help just to help people to be resilient, to help the communities not to lose a lot when it comes to disasters. And why loss and damage is of critical, why loss and damage is so critical to us. As I said, our vision is a Malawi where everyone else has a decent place to live. But if you look at the assessment that have been done, especially in the recent past in terms of disaster, if you talk about Cyclone Idai in 2019, where about over 20,000 households were affected, actually houses were damaged. And looking at the assessment that was done in 2022, after Cyclone Gombe and Cyclone Anna, there were over 30,000 households. And the biggest of all was in last year after Cyclone Fred struck. I think there was the sector the social sector that was affected the most was the housing sector, because over 800,000 houses were destroyed. So as an organization that is striving to ensure that everyone in Malawi has a decent place to live, we feel that loss and damage is very critical, because every time we are trying to promote to construct one house, it's like when disaster comes in, we're taken back 1,000 steps against one step that we try to move forward. So although we are slightly new in this sector, but it's something that we're considering seriously as we're developing the new country strategy for the next 5 years to take climate change and loss and damage issues more seriously moving forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Habitat for Humanity, and also for really pointing out, I like this panel. There's diversity where there's the soft skills that we're talking about, and then the economic losses that are always counted in our post-disaster needs assessment, the housing sector, and why it's important to consider that. It would really be interesting to see how a resilient house looks like. Please do share later. But I want to move back to you, Brenda. And moving to you, I want to really understand. You know, we've been in COPs. We're now going towards COP29, and it has shared from the morning till now that we've been in so many COPs. I just want to find out from you, is there any hope for the Loss and Damage Fund? For all of us, we were celebrating the Dubai declaration that the Loss and Damage Fund now is in place. But you have just taken us to reality to say, not really. The World Bank can actually decide to not take this on. So what are the gaps and opportunities that depend on delivering loss and damage finance that we need to be aware of? And where do we ensure that all of us are taking an active role in that? Can we say that we are being consulted as a group? Do COP28, COP29 outcomes really matter to the everyday life of a Malawian?
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Chikondi, for that. Is there hope? Yes, there is hope. Why am I saying this? During COP27, to finally have loss and damage finance as one of the sub-items, sub-agenda items, and issues to do with finance, it was because of the momentum that came in, like the push and the advocacy that people actually showcased, especially from civil societies, to actually like get to a point where I think parties have actually agreed to say, okay, we need to have adopt loss and damage finance and issues related to finance, and it's there, right? So I always say COP is like a conclusion of the many meetings that are already happening within the year. And most of the times our focus is on COP. You know, everyone wants to follow COP. Everybody wants to participate in COP. But there's so many meetings that are happening within the year. For example, COP28, the outcome. There's so many action points that are happening within the year. As we're speaking right now, today is just the conclusion of the first board meeting of the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage. Those are like critical things that we really need to understand what's happening, you know. Last week it was like the EXCOM, the Executive Committee on Wansao International Mechanism. What was the agenda? What has been like the outcomes? What do we want to see? So, and then as we're preparing for intersessional meetings in June, there's also going to be the Glasgow dialogue that's going to happen there, which is just like trying to look into like the modalities of like the loss and damage finance. And there's hope that in April we're going to have the first board meeting for the loss and damage finance. So those are like the opportunities that we really need to take advantage of to say, if we really want to push for like our agenda forward, whereby we can be able to engage our negotiators, those are the platforms where we really need to push to say, this is what we want as Africa, this is what we want, these are the challenges that we have, and this is what we want to see. For example, on your agenda, this is what you need to discuss, but these are our expectations, these are our demands. We also need to help them understand, like, because we work in communities, we understand like the vulnerabilities that our communities are like going through. So we have so much evidence that we have at hand to be able to help us push the agenda that we have. So our focus shouldn't just be at COP29, but if we want to make change, I think the change needs to be made now. So the momentum that like the civil societies has actually been showing, I think that's the kind of momentum that we really need to start with and build up on in this year, and not just like start making noise when it's in October and we know that, okay, COP is happening next month. Honestly, I don't think that kind of noise really make any change. But if we really need to make, like, those are the opportunities that we really have, like, at hand. And at the same time also, when we say, like, do we ensure that, like, the people like women, girls, youth, children, are they being consulted? Honestly, we are the ones who are going to consult those people because we are representing them. Like, when we say we are representing the people, when you come here, do we really go back and try to understand, like, what is it that they want to see coming to when it comes to loss and damage? Do they even understand what loss and damage is? Because loss and damage is context-based. The way I've been impacted will actually be different from the way you've been impacted from the same flood that we all, like, you know, that hit us all. So we also need to make sure that they are being, like, impacted. And we are the ones who are going to provide that platform that we really want them, and no one else is going to come if we don't provide that platform that those people really require. So I would say there's hope. Those gaps that we are seeing, really, we should actually capitalize on them and look at them as opportunities to say, this is really what we want to push, and this is what they really want to see happening at COP29. And for that to happen, we need to start now.
Great, thank you. So you bring in the perspective that it needs to start with acting on those policy recommendations when we get back to the country. Where there are gaps, we go input into COP29 positions, and then we go on. So there's that circle of implementing policy actions year in, year out, and we need to know. How do we know what's going on? How do we know?
Okay, so I love the fact that this conference is actually happening right now, and it's like a diversity group. Like, we are from civil societies. There's some from the government. You know, some are like negotiators. And the other session that's happening in room 1, there's Richard, who is like one of the panelists. He was the chair of the transitional committee, and he has actually been voted, like, selected into the loss and damage fund board. I think let's capitalize on the people who are, like, really representing us and not really just look at them from a distance. You know, let's bring them into these circles. Let's help them understand so that when they're going there, this is why the consultation really has to start from, like, grassroots level and going up, so that when we say this is what, like, the modalities that we want to see in the loss and damage policies, it should be something that's like from like a bottom-up approach, not really like after they have consulted on top and then we're bringing it down. Like it should be like, you know, a bottom-up approach. Let them let the people understand, and they should tell us what is it that they want, and let's bring those people that we have that are representing us in such spaces, and, you know, let them understand this is what we want to see. And when they go there, they should be speaking from something that we want to see, and not be like out of surprise to say, oh, okay, I think this is what Africa is saying, or what RGC is prioritizing on.
Great. Thank you very much, Brenda, for that. And I now turn to you, John, because you have talked about, hey, we need to bring in the women, bring in the children, bring in the young people into the conversation. And Brenda has also just said, let it be bottom up. What are the existing challenges that you're seeing when it comes to this conversation of really having grassroots voices being part of the policy spaces? What do you see as the things that hinder effective inclusion? Because I don't think people just dream up and decide to leave out everybody. What are those challenges that we need to be aware of, and how do we ensure that vulnerable communities are contributing?
Yeah, thanks so much, Chikwandi. So, yeah, I think in terms of challenges, first of all, I think we all know in terms of how our policy frameworks are formulated. Hardly would you see that meaningful consultations are done for the people that are affected by the particular issues that the particular policy is trying to address. In the context of Malawi, so many children, women, the youth, young people have been impacted by floods, cyclones, the recent ones in Kota Kota, Karonga, in the recent past, the cyclone Fred. But we hardly see in terms of policy consultations or policy formulation that they are consulted. Normally we are comfortable to do the consultations in the comfort of hotels where we are safe from cyclones and not going into the actual areas where people are impacted. I think that's one challenge that I see. Of course, I know efforts are made in terms of reaching out to people, but I think the platforms are not as inclusive enough to ensure that the views of these affected groups are taken on board. So I think that's the critical challenge for me. Secondly, it's about building, you know, the demand, you know, side of things. So many of us working in the NGO space and civil society, we've done our part in terms of building that kind of a demand. But I think in terms of ensuring that demand is made adequately in terms of the needs of the people, I think that kind of interaction and engagement is not yet there. So that's another challenge that we need to be dealing with. However, much as there are those challenges, I also appreciate that there are some opportunities as well in place that we need to be maybe grabbing in as far as ensuring that the voices of all these three critical groups are engaged. By the way, we're not siding, we're not kind of like excluding the men. Men are also impacted and affected, and also I know there are quite a number of them in this room. But I think we're talking about these vulnerable, most vulnerable groups, as it were. So some of the opportunities that I can say, the first one is the resilience of these groups that we've talked about. Disasters come, cyclones come, you'd find that they find their own local means in terms of coping, but I think they need more support. One of the opportunities that is emerging is about the social protection, which is emerging from a number of players. But I think how we link to these impacts, loss and damage to social protection becomes very critical. And I would like to say and make a recommendation to that regard that the loss and damage should embrace the meaningful and sustainable social protection mechanisms, because these become so handy in as far as ensuring that we, in real time, respond to the diverse needs of these groups. So social protection becomes key, and it provides, especially if it's an aspect of cash involved, it provides, opportunities for these groups to make decisions on what really best works for them in those circumstances. Quite often, we have gone with the relief items, which are kind of, do not address the diverse needs of these groups. So, taking advantage of social protection opportunities that different donors are bringing, I think that becomes another important element. Finally, in terms of the gap, let me draw you back to the research that I talked about for Save the Children that we did. It's a solid research I'm happy to share, we'll be sharing in terms of the details. What it established was that the climate financing mechanisms that are currently available, you'd find that out of 500 plus projects funded by Matrato donors, only 2.4% of interventions were targeting the children, as it were, which is a huge, huge gap. And therefore, we would like to see, for instance, in the new loss and damage fund, to learn lessons from these existing frameworks. I think that's very critical, and that's another opportunity that we need to be looking at. What have we learned that is not working, and therefore, how can we do better in as far as the loss and damage is concerned? So for me, ensuring that we are so deliberate and intentional and categorically targeting these groups would be very critical in ensuring that we meet their diverse needs as well.
Great, thank you. I'm quite shocked, only 2% going to children, so where does the money go? Where is the money? All right, let's not go into that conversation, because even the minister this morning really alluded to that, to say, as much as we are talking about loss and damage fund, we really need to make sure that it is getting to those people. So 2%, I'm wondering, if children are getting 2%, how much was the percentage for women and the men? So where did the money go? But then, I digress. Going back to you, Lucy, I just want to now hear from that. We have heard of the challenges of these critical sectors, the youth, the children, the women. But when it comes to housing, what are the perspectives that you see as major challenges that the housing sector is usually put on the side burner? What can we learn from that as we are preparing for the loss and damage fund?
Okay. Thank you so much, Konti. Before I go into the details of the challenges, I just wanted to echo what Dr. Joyce Banda said this morning, but I think even the minister said from a different angle. So as an organization, we are tackling loss and damage from the resilience and risk reduction side. And just to echo what Dr. Banda said this morning about starting small, she talked a lot about not waiting for the big finances, not waiting for the big monies, but start with what we have. And I think the minister also talked about Jesus multiplying the fish that was already existing. So as an organization, we know and we appreciate the challenges that are there, especially the housing sector. As I said earlier, that is one of the social sector that is hugely affected by disasters. As an organization, we decided, regardless of the challenges, especially in terms of financing that we've been facing in this sector, but we decided to start the journey with the little that we have. So there are so many things that we've already, we do and we promote and we're currently doing. And as I'm making this presentation, I think it's also a call to other organizations here, even the participants that are also watching, that let's learn from whatever we're going to share that Habitat is doing and see how we can also integrate with our programming, because we have the resources, okay? From the little that we have, if we get started, then we should be able to attract more funding for bigger projects. So for Habitat, with the limited resources that we have, we are currently promoting what we call participatory approach for safer shelter awareness, and the build back better and safer in different communities, just to help building the capacity of the communities to be empowered enough to be able to respond to disaster. The other thing that we also noted, I think my colleagues talked about the capacity. We also realized that I think some of these loss and damage, the effect or the impact of climate, the impact of disaster is huge because of lack of capacity in terms of construction of disaster resilient houses. So as Habitat, we're also trying to build the capacity of the local artisans. We know we have so many artisans in our different communities who construct different houses. So our target is those local artisans that want to build their capacity. So every time they're constructing a house, every time you call one artisan to come and construct a house for you, they should already have that knowledge that this is the kind of house that I'm going to construct. So we just want to make sure that we flood that the capacity of the local artisans on how they can build a resilient structure. The other thing that we've done, I think I also talked about earlier, is adjusting the designs of the houses that we're constructing to make sure that they have the features that are disaster resilient. Again, as an organization, we are currently complementing the efforts of the Malawi government. As we all know, I'm not sure, there was a call to ban use of bent bricks some few years ago by government of Malawi. And as an organization, we've taken that on board. And I think as a country as well, if each one of us could also take that and put into practice, we should be able to protect the environment. And by doing that, we should also be able to reduce the impacts of climate change. The other thing that we're doing as an organization, in 2022, we joined hands with SISONEC. I think there was a mention about the DRM bill that was passed into law. Habitat, we played a very active role on that one because we could foresee the benefit of the DRM bill if it's passed into law. And basically, I think some of the issues that, I don't know, is it Vitumbiko? The one who made the research on financing, he also talked about. I think what was of great interest for us is the establishment of a trust fund for disaster response, but also just having, providing for resourcing for reconstruction. Because there's, I think every time, like previously with the policy that we had, the major focus was on disaster response. When there is disaster, we just respond to disaster and then we go. But what happens to the community after the disaster? I think it wasn't much of our interest. So the reason why Habitat was in the forefront to hold hands with SISONEC to make sure that this bill is passed into law was this element where there will be a provision for resourcing for reconstruction. And again, in 2023, we also joined hands with the Malawi government. And I think recently, though, you'll be able to appreciate the communication in different medias across Malawi. We are trying to come up, we actually developing what we call the Malawi designs. The other thing that we noted was, I think the other challenge that we have as a country is people do not have access to house designs that can stand disaster. So we are coming up with different prototypes. We've done about 18 of them. We worked in consultation with the Malawi engineers. I think there is Malawi engineers, the architects, Malawi Housing, as well as Malawi Red Cross Society. So these designs will be available to the general public. In addition, we also engaged comedians to come up with sensitization messages where they are focusing more on so all these information will be available. And I think before my time ends, I just wanted also to talk about, we are currently planning what we call a National Housing Symposium in May this year. And I will be calling out all housing practitioners. And again, the agenda is around loss and damage and how we can make the housing sector resilient. And finally, I just wanted to also share briefly about the research that was done by Habitat International. And I think it's going to be accessible from our comms team. I think Chapter and Crispin are here. They will be able to share with you. But I would urge you to go through that report because there are so many things that we, the team looked into in terms of how housing can be also be a, so we are looking at climate adaptation through housing with focus in informal settlements, but it can be duplicated even at local level. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. A big hand for our panel. So we have heard from them, like looking at issues of inclusiveness, issues of social protection, issues of Malawi designs, and more. I want to turn to the panel and ask if there is a specific question. I know there's a hand over there that's itching. Please, someone can help me with the passing of the mic, and we can take. I think we see 4 hands. Let's see how we do. All right, let's start.
Thank you very much. My question is going to Brenda. Having engaged in the issues of COP, I had an experience with the GCF, Global Climate Fund. It was very difficult, and it's still difficult to access funds because of the modalities and the structures which were put in place. One of the conditions is that a government or a country should have the national implementing entity, which you go through that to access the funds. I'm not sure how flexible the L&D, the loss and damage financing, to access it through World Bank. I'm not sure how it's going to be done. Like NGO, how can it apply, how can it write its proposal to access the fund from World Bank? The government, can it just write a proposal straight to the World Bank? Or is the same process like the Green Climate Fund, whereby they need a national implementing entity, which is difficult for it to be to be approved. In Malawi, we tried, we failed. We tried with 3 organizations, we failed. And it was not approved. Up to now, I don't think if we have the national implementing entity in Malawi. So may you clarify on this, because I see the funds are there, but at the middle here, it's difficult. There's a bridge for you to cross to access the funds, which I see is difficult. May you clarify on that, or may we see the gaps which are there, or may we advocate for some changes to make it flexible for least developed countries to access the funds, not like the GCF, which was very difficult and still difficult. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I didn't mention my name. My name is Felix Minjari from ACT Alliance.
Can we just take the questions and then we address them at once?
Thank you very much, Chikondi and the whole panel. My name is Nozgenji Bilima. I work for Pelam Malawi, where we're promoting agroecology with smallholder farmers. I have a few things to say and questions. I don't know who especially it would go to, but maybe especially Brenda. On the access to L&D, how does it support other recommendations, especially from other bodies, like, for example, IPCC? IPCC, I think, specifically said that for climate change, I think support to agroecology would also help to make sure that climate change is not like increasing the effects. How does it actually support such reports, for example? Another thing that I've seen as a gap also is there is a lot of money that comes into issues of climate change, but there is a gap in strategizing how this money can make sure that it's going into the main challenges that are affecting especially the smallholder farmers. How does it work, especially at the negotiations level? Make sure that the voices of those that are underneath are also heard at that point.
The last one.
Yes. The last one is sharing of information, especially you talked about the awareness where information has to come from bottom up, the bottom up approach. But right now, as we speak, I don't think I've seen anything, even in the channels of information sharing, where there is sharing of weather recommendations or anything that was talked about at COP. I think that is also one of the gaps that we always make sure that it's, I don't know how to say it, we don't know how to share that information from that level to where the smallholder farmers or communities have to know what deliberations have been, or the agreements, even the children, for example, to save the children. I don't think the children know what was discussed and how those discussions affect them. But we actually expect them to understand that climate change right now is happening, and climate change is affected in such ways, and all that stuff. Actually, the last point is that the L&D is looking at responding, right, after the disaster has happened. But that gap where I want to talk about is we are not really investing much time or much effort into making sure that we are actually avoiding the problem. So even L&D should be looking at avoiding the problem instead of responding to it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mine, I think, is not a question as such, but a comment. I understand that the loss and damage and the vulnerability, when we put these things together, at the end of it all, a local Malawian is much highly affected. As we all know that the statistics concerning the entrepreneur sector is about 20 point something percent, 20.3, 20.57%, depending on the sources of your the statistics. However, we look at the resources that comes to address those things. I know that the government of Malawi is only supporting few, only one district, for example, the social cash transfer is only for Choro districts. The issue of how to coordinate the development partners when it comes to such programs is also an issue because each and every development partner brings their own programs, and government is taken unaware because of they have no much influence when it comes to controlling the donors, development partners, when it comes to the investment towards social protection interventions. Secondly, I think the issue of the law, there's no law that could abide the government to support the social protection interventions, so that when issues of loss damage happens, the government should feel obliged to support towards the social protection interventions, those people who have been affected by various areas. My just call is an issue of making sure that the stakeholders coming together. I know that there is a network looking at issues of social protection, making sure that the government should be able to fast track the finalization of the policy, social protection policy, and make sure that at least there are certain structures that can make sense when it comes to implementation of the programs. So again, I've heard about various development partners, for example, when they comes in, I've heard about the World Bank. I think the most important thing is to understand what is the aim of this institution. For example, if we mention by the mention of an organization, we should look at what is their interest. Is their interest really making sure that the people are out of poverty, or making sure that the people should still be in poverty? Depending on the design of that institution, that also helps. I heard about the institution that is coordinating the resources. I know that happens because maybe the government lost control when it comes to such type of programs. So it's just my plea that the coordination is one thing, the government should come into control in terms of the implementation of programs. So again, the members of
1
parliament,
minute.
the policymakers, I'm looking at that as very key because the understanding of social protection as a charity, not a right, is very high because much of us, we don't think that the social protection is a key, as each and every person needs one way or the other social protection when it comes to any type of intervention that we can come across. So in that way, I think I should end here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. And just to note, you have a social protection expert right behind you. So in case Mr. Tom Denje, so in case there are questions that might not be addressed, please do a bilateral with him. He has great wealth of info on the issues you've raised.
Thank you very much. Mine is a very quick one. Again, my name is Richard Hussein from Catholic Development Commission in my CADECOM. I think most of the discussion I've seen has been towards economic losses and damage, but I think there's a bit of a neglect somehow in terms of non-economic loss and damage. I just wanted to also hear from the panelists, particularly maybe around if from the housing sector, in terms of how, if you have made any considerations in terms of non-economic losses and damage as you are providing various services. Because I've seen we could provide a house, but what are the cultural issues? What are, you know, those are social aspects into that? How do we make sure that those are into play? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions online? None. All right, thank you. So you have, I think we have covered everyone. Is there someone? Okay.
Is there still time? All right, I am Chimwemwe. I'll be quick. All right, I've heard from the morning presentations, and I've read different papers where we are saying that Africa, we lack this technical capacity to put together and design projects on loss and damage, as well as climate change in general. So I just wanted to get a clear understanding, at least to unpack this. What aspects are they looking at to say that you don't have capacity in this area? Because from where I'm standing, sorry to say this, I'm thinking like maybe because of the global economic challenges, the global north is now committed to solve their own problems than to commit to climate justice through funding the loss and damage. Because if the issue is about data, maybe it's true, but if you go to African colleges and universities, there's a lot of data on climate change and loss and damage which can be used to design these projects. Is it an issue of the design itself? Even if we don't have the instruments to measure climate change or whatsoever, we can tap into the global asset rights as well as other data sources and put together these designs. Is it really that we are failing to put together a proposal or design a project? Or maybe there's another reason why we cannot tap into this funding? That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe we have taken, okay, in the okay, so what we're going to do, how many minutes do we have? How many minutes do we have? 10 more, right? I think we started at 22. Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. So.
I'll try to be as quick as I can, understanding that we have so many questions. So starting with the question on GCF accessibility, I think that's the whole reflection of the Loss and Damage Fund. The whole essence is to reflect on, just so that we shouldn't repeat, like have another GCF in making. Why are we saying this is because like everybody understand of like the complexity to be able to access GCF funds At the same time, I think the mechanisms, like it's too much, the conditions that are there. So the loss and damage fund, the plan is to be like to make it flexible and accessible, even like to local institutions or local organizations, and not really aim at having other intermediary or like organizations, and also ensure that the fund is accessible, reliable, immediate, independent, and not really having like a lot of procedures, because loss and damage is something that has happened now and we need to deal with it at the same time. And if you look at GCF fund, like you write a proposal now, and for you to actually have access to the funds is like 3 years later. So with loss and damage, like the impact, we cannot wait for like 3 more years to actually be dealing with that. Accessibility. Okay, there was another question there on like support, like supporting other reports for like smallholder farmers and okay, and all that. So I think what I can like the gap on strategizing funds to be accessible. So what I can say is like what I've already said, to say that the loss and damage fund, like the whole mechanism is to make sure that it's accessible and reliable to everybody, even those local farmers. And on the issue of like COP outcome dissemination, I think I would say like the major challenge is like the scope, to be able to make sure that a lot of people have access to like the information. But this dissemination is there, because after we came back, the CSOs really, we had like a COP28 dissemination. But I can really, I can agree with you to say it was really that not really accessible to like majority. So I think the issue is about like reaching out to as many people as we can. On the lack of technical assistance for like African countries and LGCs, I think John and Lucy can also come in, but what I can say is that it's not really about like having access to data and all of that, but being in a position where you've been given the funds and you're able to actually utilize the funds in a way that it's supposed to be done. Like, do you have that capacity in a way that you'll be able to utilize that? So the whole essence of like the Santiago network on loss and damage is there, like the network is there to build capacities of like countries and organizations and experts, so that we can be able in a like better positioned in a way that we are able to actually utilize the funds that we've been given.
Thank you. Brenda, before you pass the mic, just one key recommendation, because the mic is not coming back to you.
One key recommendation that I can say, I think there's so many things that we're doing as organizations, as institutions, but we're doing them in silos. And climate change is a complex problem. And if we are going to work on this, we really need to like work on it transdisciplinarily, like whereby we are actually working as a team, knowing that we are fighting the same battle.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So maybe I will respond to one or two questions. On the World Bank, I think I agree with Felix. Accessibility, if World Bank is going to be really the one to be, disbursing the funds, it's going to be a tall order. We all know what is happening at the moment with World Bank. So we really need to have loss and damage, have sort of, I'll use decentralized mechanisms, where I think countries like Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia, when a disaster has occurred, they can, in the real time, access, the funds. And I believe we have got those regional mechanisms that can facilitate that. And I believe that should be the way to go, in as far as ensuring that we have timely access to funds. The recommendation in terms of moving forward, in terms of especially engaging the critical groups I've talked about, children, youth, and the women. So the key point is that the child rights, the women's rights, the rights of young people should be the guiding principle in as far as ensuring that the loss and damage fund, put at the center these vulnerable groups. Further to that, we need to ensure that all the diverse needs of these groups are taken into account. And it is important in that regard to have that kind of categorical targeting in as far as ensuring that you are meeting the needs of all these groups within the context of loss and damage. I think that would be very fundamental to ensure that no child, no woman, no smallholder farmer, no young person, no youth is left behind within the framework of loss and damage, because ultimately we are dealing with a climate injustice, and therefore loss and damage must deal with this climate justice in a very justice in a very just manner. Let's not create injustices where we're trying to address the injustices that the climate crisis has caused in our context. So critical to ensure that these groups are at the center of loss and damage fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Lucy?
Okay, thank you so much. Just a quick one that as Habitat, we don't work as an independent entity. When we're working in different communities, working hand in hand with government. So as we take care of the hardware, there are different ministries that also look into the other aspects. So just to respond to your question briefly, that because we complement the efforts of governments, and as we are supporting the economical side, the other ministries are also supporting the other side. And just the last words, I think for me, I'll still stick to it starts with us. I think if we are talking of COP28 now, it means there have been so many COPs, okay? And I don't know what, as a country, we've done after every COP. Because at the end of the day, we might end up just having meetings after every COP we meet, and then next year we'll meet again. But what is it that we're able to take out of that COP and implement as a country? I think it's high time that as a country, as Malawi, we need to be independent, okay, and find means of how we can stand on our own, on how we can deal with these issues on our own. And I think this discussion already started during the main discussion, that I think it's high time that we should also try to see how we can do things on our own. I think we are capable. We just need to improve the level of accountability on our resources. We should be able to be self-sustaining. So I think let's start thinking more about what we can do for ourselves, for our own people, because sometimes maybe the global world does not understand how critical the issues are on the ground, but we understand better. So we need to start. It starts with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A big clap for our panelists. And also a huge thanks to Lingi Aze, who has been rapporteuring all that we have shared. I know that there was still more that the room wanted to discuss. We can use the time as we are moving back into the room to further discuss the issues. Critical things that they have said, it's about coordination, it's about rights, but also an interesting perspective on a sector that's really causing a lot of headache for Malawians. I think, I'm not sure about the other countries, the construction sector and the accountability issues there. We are living the impacts. South Sudan, people are going without water. We have Zambia, southern Malawi, people are, have lost all crop. So these issues are real. These issues require serious attention, and they require those that are being impacted to be in the driver's seat of where we go. I would like to thank you all for taking your time to join this session this afternoon, and hopefully the recommendations that will be made out of this conference will lead into something substantial and probably a movement that will lead to more policy into practice. Thank you very much, and wishing you a lovely evening.